Well, welcome everyone on a beautiful day, at least here in Georgia, and I assume in Florida. And I think we have a few Alabama folks on the line. I'm joined by Paige Tidwell. Paige and
Hello?
I, thank you, Paige. She's going to be our hostess, host, guide, teacher, the whole deal. She is helping run the GoToMeeting. So Paige will be looking for questions or comments, and we will have time at the end of this hour-long webinar. We'll save a little time for questions and answers. Paige and I also at the UCED run a technical assistance center in Georgia called Advancing Employment. We encourage you to hit that. That will give you the link there at the end of the webinar as well. For those of you who love copies of PowerPoints, this one is available and we'll figure out a way to get that to you. However, right now we have two PDFs, as you'll see in the pane, two handouts, which really connect to what we're talking about today. Kind of an employer perspective, an economic perspective of what we do. And then probably really important to all of us, I know I've been setting in on lots of webinars and phone calls and teleconferences about how we keep our work going during this time. And I am sending my best to all of you, both for your health and your family and friends' health. We will get through this, and the general virtual CE delivery guidance is something from Griffin Hammes. And I know that all of us are sitting in on lots of webinars. That's one of the I guess, perks of what we're going through is there's a lot of new content delivery. So there's a lot to choose from. But certainly you can join us at Advancing Employment and join the community of practice there. Griffin Hammes, the Office of Disability Employment Policy, is doing a lot of webinars. And of course, each one of our states are. Here in Georgia, the DD Network is running a series of webinars as well. So do yourself a favor and continue to listen in on those. We're going to have a little giveaway at the end of the webinar. So, if you want something free, stay on. Don't ignore us yet. We're going to cover some topics today, a little ambitious probably, but because you are going to get a copy of the PowerPoint and because this is a starting point, we hope that we can stimulate some discussion, get you thinking about a few things, and maybe just provide some tools and tips as we're moving through probably the most cliche phrase now, our new normal. But we're going to cover kind of the difference between what we do around labor market engagement of employers, and then how we might do that in a more economic focused way through customization or some other tools. There are a lot of downsides to what we're going through, but I'm certainly committed, and I bet most of you are too, of leaving this experience with new skills, maybe some more passion and some more dedication, maybe wake us up a little, make sure that we understand we have a sense of urgency, not only in our own lives, but for those people that we are helping. So we will talk about what we can do during this time through the lens of conversation and discovering unmet needs and building social capital. To that end, this is, I think, the fourth, if I'm not mistaken, page of our Advancing Employment webinar series. We'll take a little break and start up a new series as well, and certainly social capital, building robust discovery teams, more tips on how to keep the work moving forward. We'll be doing those as well. So sit back and relax. A couple years ago, I decided, okay, if I'm going to actually be on a webinar, I'm going to try to silence my devices, try to practice good listening, maybe have some questions. So do that for me and get your daytime adult beverage, water, coffee, tea, pop, whatever that is, and we'll do our best here. Well, there's a reason we call this topic and root it in economics. And part of what I want to try to persuade you to think about today is to use some of the research and some of the initiatives that are already there to bolster what you're doing. None of us know what the economic situation will look like in 4 or 5 months unless we have some economist on the line. But I do know that we'll get through this, and we all know that we represent and work with some very talented people for whom, if we provide the right supports and opportunities, they can contribute greatly. Dr. Samara is a PhD at Kent State University. He's an interesting fella. Dr. Samara does lots of research. If you type him in, you're going to find tons of great stuff. I'm friendly with Dr. Samara. I'm a big fan of his. This was one of his first kind of takes at looking particularly at what we do in supported employment. And I'm always kind of shocked when people don't have this at the ready, because this is a little different way of thinking about what we do. So last month or the month before that, if you have put somebody to work, you just returned to taxpayers $3,000 per year per person. That's return on investment. We spend a lot of time talking about funding and our own programs and state and federal budgets, but this really looks at what we do returning a net benefit of over $3,000 to taxpayers. That's something you can use. I fold it into presentations to employers, to boards of directors. I recently did a group with some employers who are wanting to really diversify their talent pool, and I use that figure there as well. So, jot that down. If you want the PowerPoint, we'll get it to you. I'm working with some provider agencies, some school systems that are using this in the way that they engage employers, because it's a good sound number. So that first one was about return on investment to taxpayers. This one is different. I come from a family. I have a sister with a disability. My other sister works in a residential group home, and so this represents certainly my family. But we found out that 5.5% of U.S. households have a member with an intellectual disability. Now, this is really powerful because those households buy things, yes, and that represents $31 billion in buying power annually. They also found out that there are households that have an immediate family member, 7.1%. That combined puts that collective annual buying power at $66 billion. Now, that is as this says, a robust and important group in the U.S. consumer market. And so when we're talking to employers, when we're really trying to engage, we want them to know that we represent people who have a good amount of purchasing power annually. So you have return on investment, yes, and then the buying power. Okay, third one, and I promise we'll quit talking about numbers and money a little bit. Some of you may have seen this, and if you haven't, you can quickly Google and get the full report as well. Last year, about this time, a group of what we call state accountants or comptrollers got together and really looked at their portfolios. So the states that we live in, obviously somebody at the state level is making some decisions about pensions and what to invest in. And you are seeing $1 trillion there. That is exactly what you're seeing. And what this group has done has said to their investors that they adopt policies for those three important bullets. Now, for us, that first one is right there, hiring people with disabilities. Now, here's the interesting point. This is $1 trillion. Every one of these, and these are large Fortune 500 companies, mostly in this portfolio, they've appealed to these companies, and appeal is a weak word because they've asked their board of directors that they submit to an audit, disability inclusion audit, including hiring, and that they report that to their boards and how they are doing starting in 2022. $1 trillion. With that decision to those investors has really opened doors for us. So in other words, this is business. This is large business coming to the table saying, we prioritize this and we want to know how you're doing. And the assumption is if you don't do well, we may not invest in your company, those big state pensions and comptrollers. So you have the first slide around return to taxpayers on what we do. You have the second one, $66 billion in purchasing power, and this one, a portfolio that's asking those companies that they're investing in to make sure they're auditing how they are doing in hiring folks. 1 trillion. You can see how those three pieces are pretty strong arguments when we are talking to local employers, when we're doing presentations. I work with some providers who have put the return on investment right on their marketing materials. So think about those three slides. Think about what that might mean in your own work. By the way, that 1 trillion only represents 3 states' comptrollers. I'm working with a state on the East Coast and their comptroller to see if they can do that as well. So might be a great decision to put in front of your legislative body, comptroller, that kind of thing. Okay, well, that was to launch us into thinking a little differently about what we do. And most of us in this field, I'm celebrating 30 years of being in employment supports, are pretty good at helping a job seeker find a current opening, one that's posted, advertised, and help them, advocate for them to get hired. Most of us can do that pretty well. But that's only one way of approaching employers, yes? We also need to look at unique job development. Now, sometimes we've called that job carving or customized employment or even creating positions, right? But we have to be able to do that across a continuum and really look at one of my favorite topics, which I think will turn into a webinar in the new series, is social capital. And if you've read anything like Bowling Alone or read any about social capital, it's like any other resource. You can earn it and you can spend it. And some people are really good at earning social capital. Other people burn through it pretty quickly, but there's a science to it, right? And it has to do with personal relationships, being curious, having a sense of reciprocity, making sure that we understand economic development. And when I say that, I don't mean that we're suddenly going to be on panels that bring in a new factory. I don't mean that. I mean becoming a subject matter expert on the economic life of your community. Most of us don't know much of that. A lot of my work takes me to states around the country, and I don't know a lot of people there. So I try to find the person who does know a lot of people. That's called social capital, and it helps you be vouched for when you are doing job development or talking to an employer. So labor-driven market, we think we kind of know what those are, right? That there is a way of engaging employers. We spend a lot of time, and I'm not picking on this, but we spend a lot of our time in human services on resume writing and interviewing skills, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. It's just that doesn't really help somebody find employment. Connections and figuring out how we broaden our job development skills, including one of my favorites, which we will review, the knowledge, skills, and abilities and other traits of someone who understands truly how to engage employers in a customized way. So we only know about 5% of the openings around us. Now that always shocks people because they think, well, no, I can estimate that I know more than that. That comes out of the AP research back in the 2008 and 2009 during the economic downturn. And those are the ones that we hear about, right, that are actively recruited for. The reason we don't know about the other ones is even large companies prefer word of mouth, right? So that if you don't know the people where there's an opening, you're rarely going to find out what that employer's needs are. So we want to, again, become curious to discover all aspects of the employment life in our communities, and that gets exciting. I don't know about you, but I probably got tapped out on job development going to only the places I'd normally go to, 15 years ago. This also makes it exciting. It makes us worth more too, and I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to deepen this skill set during the time we're going through. So those common labor-driven tools are, we know the hiring manager at a local grocery store. We We have meetings and maybe hand out a brochure. We advocate for someone to be interviewed. We emphasize the long-term supports. But again, it focuses on the jobs we know about. And what I want you to do is to think a little differently. Here are those KSAs, knowledge, skills, abilities. The O stands for other traits. Now, an other trait is something you're kind of born with. You're an introvert, you're an extrovert, you fall on the continuum. But the KSAs, you can learn, right? And this is one of my favorite ones. This comes out of, if you haven't seen this, something called the Office of Disability Employment Policy Customized Employment Model, competency model, excuse me. And there are 82 knowledge, skills, and abilities associated with 9 key components, right? And one of my favorites is right there at the top. To identify social networks. That's why social capital becomes important. And look at that word, strategically enter those networks. That means think about how I might make a connection so that I can leverage that for a job seeker, right? We won't do the quick exercise, but often I'll ask people to name the top 10 folks they could call right now if they needed help with something. And it can't be family or friends, right? It has to be people that you know professionally who you could call on. And that gives us a good idea of how rich our social capital is. This goes through a few more of the KSAs, and I won't bore you with them, but it's really worth your time. It's a 12-page document. If you haven't seen it, if you're trying to provide customized employment, or you're trying to write a job description or policies and procedures, you could not go wrong with looking at the customized employment competency model. But it is different. My point to you is it's different than what we normally do. We have turned supported employment in our country into almost just placement, right? For folks who could probably do okay on their own, for jobs we know about, and we don't have to do a lot of customization. This is a different skill set, particularly when you start thinking about how you engage an employer. And we're going to spend some time on that. I've got a friend who lives in Atlanta and owns his own business, a great guy. Wrote a great business book. If you're looking for something to read, it's called The Snowball System. It's by Mo Bunnell. He's an international trainer. Has a huge background in human resources and helping organizations perform better and grow. And we often talk about some of these things because he's interested in our work. And these are some tips, the ways to find hidden jobs, Well, you got to change the way you network, right? For a number of years in that second one, I was part of a Rotary Club. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not a big joiner. And if I was going to join something, it wouldn't necessarily be the Rotary Club. But I am so glad that I did it because over those 8 or 9 years, I had to serve on committees and subcommittees. And what did I develop? Social capital. I developed trust. So that's another tip. Oftentimes we're just approaching people. I'm sure some of you have gotten this before, and they think we're just a government program, right? We want to be more than that. We want trust. We want reciprocity. We want to develop social capital. And this is one of those ways that you can do that, right? Change the way you network, join a social civic organization. If you have anybody in your life who says, how do you know that? Kind of drives you crazy. There is no reason why we wouldn't right now be doing research on our local economies. Some of that is in flux. If you can, by the way, buy a gift certificate. When we come out of this, if you've frequented and helped a business, a bookstore, a restaurant, places like that, they're going to remember. But Googling, knowing something about the business owner, the equipment or resources that are used in that industry. I recently got to go with a young guy out west in a state, and he has the label of autism, and he's super interested in welding. And I had no idea that there are people now who use a welding app, and they bid on jobs. And this young welder agreed for me and this kid who does some hand flapping to ride around with him and watch how he bid on these kind of mobile jobs. It was really fascinating. He had a tablet. The kid I was supporting got to help bid on those, got to see how you show up someplace, you do a job for $75 and you're back on the road again, right? So Googling, finding out about industries, specific business owners, there's no reason why we would go in cold. We don't have to do cold calling. We don't have to do that. We can familiarize ourselves with the person, the family business, the industry, the whole thing. And then finally, again, this idea of social capital, being able to use your own, your organization's social capital, your spouse's, friends, family. We can do that. I'm going to show you a couple slides here that tells you why we should be doing it. This is a little research that we do kind of covertly as we're doing training. And some of this is from the online group baseline. The second two slides I'm going to show you are done during training. But overall, most of us feel pretty less than positive about our organization's ability to innovate, right? And that's across everything. That's across industries and job types and all that. But we do this kind of informal staff survey. And these have remained pretty much the same for the last 6 or 7 years. And admittedly, these are from training groups. But as you can see, most of us are doing supported employment, customized employment, transition supports for students working. Most of us are still doing these things regularly. Now, there is nothing wrong with bullet 1 through 4. There is with bullet number 5, because as soon as I ask if someone's hiring, all they have to do is say no. But still 82% of us do that. Almost 90% of us still visit major retailers and common box stores and grocery chains, reviewing one ads, whether that's online or maybe at an American Job Center, asking for applications, taking someone for an interview. Again, 1 through 4, you would expect that to be high. There's nothing wrong with that being high. There is something wrong with this one. And this has to do with the way that we use social capital, our own and the agency, school system, whoever we're working for. We don't use that much. These same people who responded to that first slide, only 11% said yes, they use their agency supply chain for job development. What does that mean? That means that every organization is a customer to some other business, right? And we only ask those folks for whom we're the customers about 11% of the time. It's growing a little on our personal supply chain. It's a little over 30%. These last two are pretty pathetic. Boards of directors, people who sit on boards for provider agencies, the leader of that provider agency, a community rehabilitation provider, they're not helping much. Now, what I'm trying to say to you is that this slide right here, that should mirror that 80 and 90%, yes? Because that helps us get to where we're at. So we're going to roll out our first poll here. Paige, if you'll roll that out, give people a chance to chime in.
Will do. Let's see here. Give everybody a couple seconds.
Yeah. Do I just click on that?
So, do you see where the percentages are going up for people who voted?
I do not, but you can read them to me.
Okay, so we're still about 52% of people, and then once we get up to make sure everyone's done it, then I'm going to close it, and then once I close it, then I'll upload the responses.
All right. Well, let's give people a few more seconds here to respond. If you would, jump right in there. There's 100 of us, so we should be able to give Paige a good thing to report on here.
All right, looks like we got about 80. So let's go ahead and close.
Okay.
And share.
Am I supposed to be able to see the poll
Do
results?
you not see it? Do you not see it?
Hold on, let
Testing
me see if I can
that.
now. Oh, I see it now. Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
What are the numbers? Are you currently engaging your area's local microenterprise center? No. What's the percentage? I can't read it without my glasses. What's the percentage page? Are you there? Well, it looks like some of you are not, and a lot of you are, so we'll just keep going here. Thank you for participating. We're going to give you some resources here at the end. It's one of my favorite things to connect with is a Micro Enterprise Center, even if I am not helping somebody in self-employment or microenterprise. Those are people who have needs, who we can buy from, who we can learn from. And these microenterprise centers all over the country are so, so very helpful. So it's great to see that some of you are actually doing that. Great. Okay, well, just a little bit about this kind of different way of doing employer engagement. And it does not mean, I often say this in training, just because we're learning new ways doesn't mean the old ways are bad, but it means that we need to have a fuller toolbox, right? That's what we're talking about here. So in this kind of employer engagement that you might call customized or specialized or rooted in kind of economic micro development, we start with the person rather than the labor market, right? And many of you have probably had training on how to identify unmet employer needs. We invest in social capital. We are looking for mutually beneficial solutions, including physical capital. What do I mean by that? Well, resource ownership, helping somebody buy a piece of equipment, capitalize them. I think that's going to be even a bigger tool that we're going to have to invest in coming out of this crisis. It's always been a great tool, but I think we're going to need to do more of that. We're creating opportunities where they don't exist. In other words, you know you've customized a job perfectly if that position didn't exist and your person's filling an unmet need. To do that, though, we have to learn and listen to needs and problems and growth areas. And that usually happens more with small businesses and nonprofits, that type of thing. So that's really what we're talking about in terms of doing this a little differently. Okay. I think Paige's internet went out, so I think we lost her. I bet she'll get back soon. So why small businesses? Well, if you've ever done job development, and as I said, I'm going into my 30th year of doing that, HR departments are there not to hire people, but to screen people out. We all know that. Small businesses tend not to have an HR rep. They don't have somebody screening folks out. Small businesses and organizations tend to be much more flexible. And so we can negotiate, we can help them more, right? My brother is a small business owner, and the folks that he employs typically don't have job descriptions, or they are very fluid and broad. And therefore, we're not coming up against that kind of structural screening out that we do in large companies. Does that mean we shouldn't be engaging large companies? No. But what I'm trying to give you some skills for is to do it just a tad bit different. Even so, these small businesses, they're open to working with us, particularly if we engage them by buying and being a customer, especially now. They want to be treated with professionalism. These folks are people who, if they wanted to, they could be working for a larger company, but because they have a passion or a certain personality and a vision, they want to do the work for themselves. And typically, that type of personality is open to risk, to thinking differently, to customizing or creating some opportunities that didn't exist. So this one slide here, I am going to ask you, there's no way for me to follow up, of course, unless you want to email me, but I'm going to ask you to do this during some of your downtime.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Paige. Thank you.
Sorry.
We're glad you're back.
All right.
So I'm going to ask you to take these four, right? And kind of think about that right where you're at. the reason I list Bob Hunton Road, and I hope we don't have anybody who will end up stalking me, is that's the road I live on in Douglasville, Georgia. It's a short road. I think it's about a mile long, and it's out in the country. And there are 4 businesses on this road, none of whom have ever been talked to about hiring somebody with an intellectual developmental disability, right? Or had anybody approach them. I, for a number of years, worked in New Mexico and found a business called Blue Water Guitars. I think if you Google it now, you still only find a couple places. But this is a guy named Robert Broche who makes beautiful guitars, and that's what my job seeker was interested in. Those home-based businesses are everywhere, but we have the big box sign syndrome. Everybody's got to do trial work period or do something on the job at Kohl's, right? We got to get away from only seeing those. So look around you. What sole proprietorships are around you? What micro enterprises? There are 26 million micro enterprises in the United States. Now, if you know what a micro enterprise is, that means typically one person, right? One job, one person, one business. They're self-employed. Think of the welder, that example I gave you, 26 million. They have needs, both capital needs and unmet needs, but we won't know those unless we engage people. People often tell me when I go to meet with them, they'll say, you don't understand, Doug, it's only the McDonald's and the Walmart here. And I say, let's go to the business license office, wherever that's at. And we get a list, and they're always surprised to find out that there are hundreds of businesses on there. Again, mostly home-based that you wouldn't know. So try to understand your local labor market that way. Become a little curious, root around, find out what's around you, and try to connect with those folks. So what does it mean to do this differently? You can't just snap your fingers and do it differently. You have to challenge yourself. When I was a provider, I spent most of my time as I was working with the local VR office trying to get us to team up to do more of this, to think in economic terms in addition to human service terms, spending more time in local businesses and less time inside our traditional systems. If you're finding yourself in your office at a provider agency or your VR office, or maybe you end up at an American Job Center, that's not enough. You've got to get the pulse and the feel of what it means to be engaged economically in your community. So understanding that disability doesn't occur in a vacuum, it's part of the local economy. As Kathy Snow has said so brilliantly, disability is natural. Families who own businesses, hiring managers, they most likely, because disability is natural, have that occurring in their family as well. There's a number one core competency in that customized employment competency model that I was mentioning. And it's exactly what this last bullet is. And I won't belabor the point, but that competency model was developed over a number of years, researched thoroughly. And again, hope you Google it and get it. But the number one core competency in helping people with intellectual and developmental disabilities get a job is that the person helping them has a positive and open approach to life. That's amazing. In other words, you can see opportunities, you can see possibilities, you're curious, you're developing social capital. This activity here, some of you, I bet, who are on the line have engaged in something like this. You can do this virtually, but when I'm working with teams, whether it's in training or I'm on site with them and we're going out into the community, we do this. Sometimes they're called informational interviews. Other people call them fact-finding missions, whatever that might be, looking for unmet needs. But the whole goal is to visit an employer that you haven't been to and be able to engage that employer in some ways that are related to determining unmet needs. In other words, not asking that kiss of death question, are you hiring, but engaging them differently. Over the years, some of these questions have been perfected a little better, and maybe you have some of your own that you're using. We'd love to hear from you. But one of those questions, after I thank the person I'm on site and they're giving me some time, I'm talking a lot less than I am now, I'll guarantee you. I'm listening, but I use some of these questions. I don't make it like an interrogation, but what product or service do you currently not provide that you would like to? That's about growth, right? And then I listen, ask some follow-up questions. I'm asking about things other than job openings. So if they tell me what product or service they'd like to offer that they don't currently, I'd say what resources are needed to do that. The young guy out west who runs his own business, mobily welding things, his was very simple. He said, I'd love to have a unique leave behind. Now, what he means by that is he'd like to leave something with his customers other than a business card or a flyer. And what we came up with was some metalworks that the young man with autism does at his home that he could leave behind, and that created a whole great opportunity for that guy. So what resources are needed to provide that service or product? So some more questions. What keeps your workflow from going smoothly? People love this one, my friends, because we could all answer it, right? Paige could answer it. Her internet dropped her, right? We could answer it. We've all been on too many Zoom meetings. But what keeps your workflow from going smoothly? What I'm trying to do there in asking that question is I'm listening for things that slow down a process. And you'll start to get good at this because you'll hear some key phrases like, well, we all have to pitch in on, or this isn't in anyone's job description, it just needs to get done. That, my friends, is a cue of an unmet need. Now, after I'm listening to those workflow issues, I want to see the tasks that are being performed. I want to observe, I want to take notes, I want to ask more questions, and more than likely, that's what someone's going to remember, right? And people are busy trying to stay afloat, probably even more so now, right? So that taking some time to analyze a specific workflow issue is really helpful, right? Well, there are other questions you can ask. You can ask questions that are similar, like what's currently not getting done. Now, that's not a workflow issue, is it? It's something that is related to, we'd like to get this done, but we just can't, right? Sometimes that's developing a community presence, keeping a warehouse more organized, surveying existing employees. Anyway, it goes on, right? And I just need to listen because this might be something I can help solve as well. Now, if this is the first time I'm meeting a business, I don't want to take up much time, but I want to ask something at the end, and you can come up with your own questions that really helps build a relationship. Let people talk about what they're proud of. Let people talk about how they're innovating, how they're making improvements, right? And I guarantee you, when you follow up with them, when you pitch a customized position, when you want some clarification, they're gonna remember that, right? Well, as I said, we have developed some of these questions more and more. I don't think one of my favorites I don't think is on here, but what keeps you awake at night? What's your top concern? We could all answer that. What's your biggest headache today, right now? If that could be solved, what would it take? Who else should I talk to? One of the questions I love to ask because I'm endlessly fascinated about employment. That's why I've been in it 30 years. I love to ask people what their families did for a living. Most of us like to talk about our families, right? And so giving people a chance to really talk about that, right? So you want to make this part of just a natural conversation. If you're not a good listener, you can learn that, fellas. You don't interrupt. You ask questions. You pay attention. I was recently with a young person, and I'm not saying all young people are this way because I could also say I was with a older person recently is doing it too, but they were just on their phone the whole time. What a great way to say, you're not that important to me, right? So find ways to show your interest immediately. When you can say to someone, I noticed that on the company's Facebook page, you guys donate to XYZ, or you won Employer of the Year 4 years ago. That shows interest. That shows that you're not just showing up and trying to get something. And you're going to see that in our focus groups here in a bit. If you want to practice this, again, even virtually, you can start doing that. When I have people do it in training or when I'm out in the field with them, these are the rules we use. But capital resources, again, will be huge as businesses reopen and try to stay open. So really be thinking about that. We've got some neat things in the pipeline for that that I think we can talk about at a later date. When you do this, of course, maybe you are practicing this already, but if you do, debrief it. Make sure you talk about what happened, what you learned, what you might want to do differently, but more importantly, how do you strengthen that social contact? Because we got to quit thinking of places as employers and businesses and more as social contact, social and economic fabric of our communities. We become much more valuable when we do that. So how do you do that? Well, you got to think in economic development terms. You have to know more than just the labor demand. It's just not enough. It's not enough to continue to be funded to just be rooting out open positions. It's just not. We have to become experts about our communities and the economic life. That we should spend just as much time thinking about purchasing power, that's what we started with, return on investment, and community strength as we do about our own funding and programs, right? They're both important. We're putting almost all of our time into thinking about those human service pieces. Okay, I'm going to get a drink of water here. Paige, why don't we try that second poll?
All right, and I hope hopefully my internet will not go down this time and freeze everything.
We don't want to lose you. We don't want to lose you, Tiger.
All right, so let's see here. Okay, here we go.
Second poll.
So what skill knowledge would help you feel more confident engaging businesses through economic job development?
You get three choices, right? Let us hear from you, guys.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yep.
What are those three, Paige? I can't read it because it's too small.
All right, yeah, the role that small capital plays in job creation, which is also resource ownership. The supply chain analysis, who buys and supplies, and then factors that influence a business to customize a job. So which of those three would either being able to do it or have knowledge of would help you feel more confident to engage businesses? We got about half the attendees have voted. It's going up
Keep
to
them
60.
coming.
Keep them coming. That's right.
Remember, there's a giveaway at the end of this webinar, guys.
All right, 69%. Let's see if we can get up to at least, 75 or more before.
Wow, you are really shooting for the moon. I like that.
Oh, 76. Let's see, 80. Come on now, folks. 77.
It may be that if you don't answer, you don't get thrown into the hat for the giveaway. I don't know. Probably not.
All right, so here, well, we can stick at 78%. That's pretty good. So I'm going to close it.
Okay.
I'll share the results.
Please do. So, I can't see them.
Okay, 24% picked role, having the role that small capital plays in job creation.
Okay.
16% identified supply chain analysis, and then 91% picked factors that influence a business to customize a job.
Woo! Thanks, guys. Great job. Well,
right.
as things would have it, we did national focus groups on that third one, the 91% one. And that's one of your handouts that Paige has so graciously put in PDF. And you can look at that. I'm just going to review a little bit of the findings there, and they are fascinating. I often use these findings with management and leadership at provider agencies to say, hey, you have 4 major cities with 25 to 30 employers who had already customized in these focus groups. and we have some results and findings. And they are really fascinating. And again, I just have 2 or 3 slides here that tries to kind of, conceptualize that. So I helped lead the one in the Southeast. We had one on the West Coast, Chicago, and in Baltimore. A couple other places, I think. Really, really interesting stuff. Serious focus groups, by the way, guys. There were stenographers taking notes. There were specific questions that were asked. And you have this entire PDF that gives you insight. So some of the results and findings have to do with that, again, that third one that most of you wanted to know about. For small employers, they really value customized employment because it's creativity being utilized, right? It's solving problems. For both large and small, they saw that these positions that we helped customize free up time for other employees, right? So they can focus on priority issues. Now, this third one's really interesting, and we probably all know this, but to employers, to businesses, customized employment sounds just like supported employment. That same friend of mine, by the way, that wrote the business book, The Snowball System, sent me an HR article, about a decade ago from an HR magazine. Guess what it was called? Job Sculpting. Sounds a lot like customized employment, doesn't it? But employers were already thinking in those ways, right? So they like to think about what we're doing as job customization, and that customization can occur before or after a hire, right? Typically, we think it all has to happen before. Again, these are the views of employers who've already customized jobs, right? A little more from them, just a little more. These are the key factors that they said when they're working with agencies that was really helpful, right? Knowing the business. What did we just talk about? How to research a business. Knowing its products, its services, its customers. Doing research beforehand and coming to the meeting with that information. Understanding and addressing the needs of the business. Now, this was a big one, and I heard some really funny things on some of this. Some of these employers said, well, people just show up. Sometimes they're from special ed, or sometimes they're from, I think, a voc rehab thing, or this nonprofit agency, and they're just always focused on selling and talking, and they're not listening, and they just want to place somebody. That should tell us something, right? They really also thought that the providers who were really creative and flexible and really helped utilize the skills and interests of the employee, that was really beneficial to them. Now, isn't this interesting? This was important enough to these businesses that being passionate made a difference to them. Being passionate about the work of finding employment for individuals with disabilities. Being responsive, right? Sorry about that. I got a little carried away. So these are all from that PDF that you have, and I just encourage you to take a look at that. Have a read and see if that answers some of your questions. There are really great tips in there that I would suggest you take the document, use it in a Zoom meeting. Say, hey, I attended this webinar, and I would love for us just to read this and have a discussion about it. I have that scheduled with Rhode Island starting in May. We're going to be using this document as well. Okay, well, we wanted to leave time for questions. I only have about 10 minutes here. Also want to give you some resources. Since we have folks on from, I think, 3 states, maybe some others, there's the Microenterprise Center, at least in Southwest Florida. There's Alabama's network, which is really similar to Georgia's. The two top, the Georgia and the Alabama one, list all the microenterprise centers, and maybe somebody in Florida could send us that network there. I couldn't really find it. And then I love SCORE, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with SCORE. If you're not, it is a resource because these are people who are retired, successful executives in businesses who've run successful businesses who have decided to volunteer their time in communities to help others who are wanting to start businesses. Now, someone will say, well, my person isn't interested in self-employment. Who cares? You've got somebody, you can go pick their brain. And I do this in every state I work in. I get a hold of the local chapter and say, hey, I'm working on a project here. I would love to have your input on this. Who else should I be talking to? I'm not starting a business, but I've never been told no, right? They're just a great national organization. You can go on there, put in your zip code, and it'll show you your local organizations. We have those two handouts, the virtual delivery guidance from Griffin Hamas. There was a webinar on that a couple days ago. I think that'll be re-aired. It really goes through a PDF of just how we can tweak some of what we're doing right now. I was really encouraged. There's a provider program that does both employment and residential supports, and they're really focused on the job seekers who are kind of in the middle of getting a case open, or maybe they're in the middle of discovery assessment or some customized job development. And they're really challenging their staff and the folks with disabilities, saying, how do you want to leave this crisis? With new skills, knowing new people, having developed more. We're working with a guy who has a real strong interest in appliances. He takes the appliances apart in his group home, and that can be a little dangerous. But we've set up a virtual tutorial with a guy who runs his own appliance repair business. He's going to leave, this young guy is going to leave this crisis when we're all healthy and ready to go. And he's going to have not only new skill sets, but somebody who knows who also has the same interest. And then
Doug,
again, that full report on employer focus groups. Yes, Paige.
we have a question.
Let's hear it.
Oh, we got a couple. Ooh, okay. All right. Well, Grace wants to know, is customized employment only a model for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or does it apply to other disabilities or persons with no disability?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's why I kind of mentioned that HR article, if I can find it, job sculpting. We all kind of naturally customize. To answer the question, though, there's a TA center, which I will need to find as well, at one of the USEDs that's focusing on customized employment for folks with psychiatric, mental health, behavioral disabilities. And it's a great question, because think about your own jobs. We customize them in some ways. I have in my job description, I'm supposed to be able to do Excel spreadsheets. I cannot do them. I don't want to learn them. And so someone helps me with those. And I help them with grant or proposal writing. So no, it is being used elsewhere. And I will also say that both the discovery portion, and Florida has been, the DD Council has been huge in this, has funded Griffin Hamas to develop a fidelity scale. And we just recently on the Griffin Hamas website, you can see the job development fidelity scale for customization. So the answer to your question is for everybody, and it's a great resource. Great question. Next one, Paige.
Okay. Lauren asks, what is your approach to showing up at the business and getting them to speak with you in the manner you have explained in this webinar? For example, do you visit a few times before scheduling? Do you call and schedule? Do you email and schedule? Or do you just show up? What is your advice on this?
I love it. I have tried to make sure I don't show up anymore. I try to, that's what I was mentioning when I work in other communities. I try to have somebody vouch for me so that I can say, hey, Mo Bunnell told me to give you a call, right? I do that here in Georgia because he's my buddy who's, involved in business and he's well respected. So I think thinking about your social capital, and again, I hope this is one of the webinars we'll do for advancing employment, thinking about how to deepen that right now and build it. Who could you start to develop who could vouch for you such that you don't have to show up cold? If I have to show up cold, though, I want to have done all my research, and I think most people prefer an email these days. And so that's my short answer to that. But if we do the social capital one, we'll give you some more tools as well. Great question.
Well, that was it for the questions so far.
Well, keep them coming in. While we're waiting to do that, though, please, we got 6 minutes. We're going to give away a book. So in addition to my work in employment supports, I don't think you all can see it yet. There it is. I also write books, and we're going to give one away. And Paige is going to take the first person to give the correct answer. You got to, I guess, type it in, Paige, right?
Yes, that was going to be the easiest way for me to.
Okay. Okay. And whoever gets this question right can choose one of these books, and I will sign it for you and mail it to you. So I grew up in a place called Wabash, Indiana, and it is known for several things, but there are two that I'm looking for. So what is Wabash, Indiana known for? And you can either get one of my memoirs, one of the novels, or the true crime book, which is about a place in Georgia called Santa Claus, Georgia. So
Okay.
what is Wabash, Indiana known for? Paige, what do you got?
Wow, we got lots of people. All right, so the first person mentioned a river.
That's good. It's called the Wabashiki, but that's not it.
Okay.
It's not the one I'm looking
All
for.
right.
Great answer.
The second person said cannonballs.
Oh, yeah. No, that's actually in a different part of Indiana, but it is
Okay.
called the Wabash Cannonball. Keep them coming. What is
The third
Wabash?
is electricity, first lighted city.
Yes, who got it? Who got it? That is the
Michelle
correct
Cruz.
answer.
Michelle Cruz.
Michelle Cruz, way to go. It was the first electrically lighted city in the country, and the Miami Indians stood on the Wabashiki banks, the river there, and watched a town lit up for the first time electrically, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. The second one, let's go ahead and give another book away. We'll give
All
another
right.
book away. Whoever can get the
same...
second one, the second correct one.
Okay, so coal, and let's see.
I like that. Nope.
We got cannonball again. J Cash, question mark.
What was that one? K Cash?
The J period Cash. Johnny Cash?
Johnny
Cash,
that's
maybe?
good. No, but you're getting closer. It is a female singer who was from Wabash, Indiana. Related, I'll give you one more hint, related to Loretta Lynn. She had, I'll give you one more clue for the last book. This singer was very notable for her long hair that touched the stage.
Shannon got it. Crystal Gale.
Way to go, Shannon. Crystal Gale.
Shannon Wood.
Okay. Both of you, please send Paige the book you would want and a mailing address, and we'll send them out to you. Thanks for playing along.
All right, and since then, we've gotten 2 questions.
Okay, let's wrap it up here with 2 questions.
All right, Grace asked, what job readiness or other aspects of the employee side are needed to allow customized employment?
Well, if I think I'm getting the question right, is it from the employer point of view, Paige? Is that what the question is?
So what job readiness or other aspects of the employees on the employee side? So how ready does the job seeker need to be to allow for customized employment?
That's a great question too, and it really has to do with implementing customized employment to fidelity. One of the things that we teach, and I've certainly found this both with my own sister and then folks I've helped find work in customized ways, is that for every barrier, let's call that a readiness issue, for every one of those readiness issues, what we're trying to do is have a corresponding ideal condition of employment that, pardon the big word here, ameliorates that readiness issue. So let's take one of the very typical ones. Somebody's hygiene's not good. We've spent lots of years working on someone's hygiene when we could look at an ideal condition of employment, which could be, where can you work where you don't have to have great hygiene? And I worked in a ceiling tile factory. That's what the All-American Industrial Motel book is about, the one there listed from 2007. And if you came in smelling good, they gave you a hard time. So we try to, in customized employment, not really think about readiness, but ideal conditions of employment. And it really changes the way you think. I love that part. Go ahead, Paige.
All right. And there's a third one, last one. So Louisa asked, a lot of small businesses are being affected by the current restrictions. What do we do to work around that? And particularly when the clients have limited to no access to internet or web portal.
Yeah.
How do we handle that?
I love the second part of that. It really has shown how little we make sure people, particularly in residential settings, have access to technology. I think it's really been kind of frightening to many of us if you've set in on some of these webinars. I will say, take a peek at that guidance that's a PDF. If people don't have that technology, this is going to sound like a rote answer, but what better time to advocate than now for that? I think our systems are more willing now to help figure some of that out than they were before. It's impossible for somebody to get a virtual tutorial, to meet somebody, to learn a new task. I mean, there's so many organizations that I've just been speaking to in the last 2 weeks that are really using YouTube tutorials to help people learn stuff. And how do you do that if there's no computer in the group home, right? So I think advocate for that, but it's a bigger issue, and please take a look at that CE guidance document. All right, I think we're at our time right here at 3, and I can see people jumping off. So Paige, thank you for helping us host. You 2 winners, please send that to Paige, and we'll mail those out. And stay tuned. We hope to launch a new Advancing Employment webinar series here sometimes in the early summer. All right, everybody, stay safe and healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have a good one.